think the law contemplates that if a gift is given and determine what the law is, and as to the propriety of it, that's it for income tax purposes as any other charitable or purpose, and that is, and I've had no contact with them as to whether...
With the investigation of utilities, is it a proper thing?
Well, I haven't passed judgment on whether it's proper or not, and I think that would be a matter for the Corporation Commission and others to pass judgment on. The Attorney General said very clearly that the gift could not be considered in the rate base. In other words, it could not be charged by the utility as a cost of doing business. And under the statute, I view my function as ministerial, and that is, unless there's something illegal about it, I see no basis under which we can turn down the gift.
I'm not disappointed that the Attorney General ruled it could be done. I felt like that there would be legal basis for the money to be received. I'm a little bit disappointed that the governor or anyone else in charge would seek to actually accept the money, though. That's disappointing. It may be legally right, but I think it's morally wrong as far as accepting the money.
We have a feedlot, and we can live with losing money in the feedlot, or we can live with losing money in the wheat, but we can't go on losing with both.
No, you can't on both.
I represent one of those districts where a number of federal people live, and I have neighbors who have retired from the federal government, who've drawn huge sums of money, and yet who draw unemployment. What's right is right and what's wrong is wrong, and for us to say to the ordinary fella, if you quit under any circumstances, no matter how much you're abused, no matter what the reason, you're not going to draw any unemployment from now on. But to say to the fat cat who works out here and draws $10,000 or $20,000, we're going to make an exception of you. You draw all you want. That's not right.
I want to make clear that I am not asking, nor do I expect, nor do I think it fair of anyone else to expect any other member of the legislature to do this. Speaker Willis is not a lawyer, so he does not have that situation. Others are not in the position that he and I are, with the influence and the ability to have the input we have in writing such legislation. I sincerely meant it when I said that I hope we can pass a bill that is meaningful, but that it would be the most difficult measure the legislature will have during this session to write.
People have voted it down twice in Oklahoma, and I'm putting my confidence in the people of this state. They recognized and they were intelligent enough to put it down once, and let's put it down again.
There's one thing this bill aims at, and that's accountability of this parole board. To make them full-time, to make them deliberate on these decisions and not make them in 2 or 3 minutes, to remove the decision-making power from faceless underlings who perhaps do study these cases and do provide these reports, but probably make the decision because the parole board, being part-time and having only a month and a half and being unsalaried, can't devote the time to make the decisions.
When you go back, you tell them there's no.
I do know one thing that we will insist upon, that it will be enforced impartially. We do not think that anyone should be made an example, whether it be one of your plush, private clubs or country clubs, or some hole in the wall that is nothing but a den of iniquity. We want it enforced even-handed in all sections of a particular city and in all sections of a particular county.
Here we go.
Harry, take a bite.
Stan's got a list of where we're headed tomorrow.
I think, well, Don checked. Don checked.
Robert.
I tell you what, we're going to do is we're going to put Donna's bathing shorts on you and take everything else off. We're going to take everything off you. Stick it. Stick it in the hole. There. It won't come out. It'll catch up there.
Ricochet.
And you start putting that up. That's about as far as back start. Come on, you all. The old spear. It would look funny, change drivers through the car. You look like you're running. Stick those old heels up, boy. Over up on the left.
Okay, come on down.
and it is taking the lead in it, and if we have a problem in Oklahoma that I want to emphasize, it is on these retirements, and something is going to have to be done. We're going to have to limit what we're putting into them, or we're going to be like the military and the federal civil service and the other federal retirement systems, which are so far out of balance that they're beginning to catch up with the national budget, and it's running away. And if we don't learn anything but what's happening at the federal level, then we're going to deserve what happens to us.
So we're either going to have to make up our minds whether we are going to build more prisons. If the governor wants to build more prisons, why he ought to come why we ought to come up with a program to build them. Either that, we're going to have to reduce the number of inmates. If he wants to go that route, he ought to let us know. Or if he wants to just go on and see if the federal courts will let us incarcerate people in 17.5-foot cell space, well, that's his alternative. But at least we know what the facts are. And I think that's something that the governor ought to come forth and let us know what he wants done, because he's the chief executive officer of this state.
In every case, at least that I have heard, where I have been present, these employees, where this subject was discussed about the chain of command, with regard to talking to legislator or commissioners, they have always been told that let us try to take care of your problem. If you're not satisfied with it at that time, you're free to go to talk to anybody you want to.
The ad valorem loss to the school district itself is in excess of $3 million annually. So I think the in lieu payment will be a substantial payment. And I've asked for an audience with the chamber leaders, and my school district has, to try to have some input as to how much that in lieu payment will be. But in dealing with the GM people, I'm sure they don't want a free ride. They're willing to pay their way, and I'm looking forward to working out the details with them.
Well, they don't depend on it that much. You know, the $10 million or so a year we get from the, quote, federal government, everybody's got to remember that federal government gets that money from you and I. Makes up 3% of the entire law enforcement budget for the state of Oklahoma. It's only 3% of the money. And the money usually goes into new and innovative programs that they wouldn't finance otherwise. We're not talking about taking policemen off the street, or we're not talking about crime running rampant in the streets. The director, the Oklahoma Crime Commission himself, told our committee last week that if we cut out the Crime Commission, that there would be a very small impact that you might not even notice on the rate of crime in Oklahoma.
Do you think
Some of the superiors have condemned a fellow officer, and I don't see how police officers can ride together and not be on the same wavelength. This is jeopardizing their lives, and I feel that the council and you, Mayor Reed, should do something about all their problems in the department.
And we've heard from a sampling of the boards, agencies, and commissions of the state of Oklahoma. I'd say we probably heard from 55 to 60 witnesses, and we have completed a sampling of the boards, agencies, and commissions of the state of Oklahoma, and we are beginning next week to concentrate on the hearing from those who have individual complaints.
I don't think the legislature is any closer to enacting a tag reform bill today than it was 2 months ago or 50 years ago. The reason is that we still have the old bottleneck of senatorial patronage. The Senate wants to keep its patronage and the House wants to take it away. The Revenue and Tax Committee of the House did pass out a bill yesterday, and it's on the floor now of the House, to reform our tag laws. But I predict that the House of Representatives will amend the bill in some way to delete senatorial patronage. But it doesn't matter. Even if the House passed a bill word for word in its present form and sent it to the Senate, I don't think the Senate would pass it, because the bill contains a provision whereby a citizen can renew his tags by direct mail back to the Oklahoma Tax Commission. And if he does that, the tag agent gets nothing. And Senator Howard told me himself that he didn't think the Senate would pass that kind of a mail-in provision because it would be a threat to the continued existence of tag agents. Looks to me like the only way that we're going to be able to get reform is to continue to circulate the initiative petition to get enough signatures to place it on the ballot. Then and only then will you see the legislature sit down and try to do something about this problem of senatorial patronage.
Over $30 million in new facilities have been constructed, and these facilities could not have been constructed, and the debt that was incurred to build them could not be serviced if it had not been for these revenues. If you eliminate these revenues, the way this bill would automatically do, you would reduce Oklahoma Natural's return to nothing. Absolutely nothing. And we have the figures that we can back that up with. We say that these matters should be considered in rate cases. The Commission has started a rate case right now. There's going to be a hearing this September. At that time, the Commission will determine what is the appropriate treatment to be given these revenues. But you should not eliminate them automatically through a cost of gas adjustment clause.
If you read definition C of a mentally ill person, you could really, by a sort of loose definition, conclude that almost every one of us on some occasion have been strange enough to fall under that definition. But let me remind you, we do not put people away under this bill because they are mentally ill. We put them away if first it is clearly demonstrated beyond a reasonable doubt that they are mentally ill, and second, it is just as clearly demonstrated that they are of danger to themselves and danger to others.
Fire has spread over a residential area on the near northeast side of Oklahoma City this afternoon. Blaze apparently started about 2 o'clock in the 400 block of Northeast 5th. Firemen battled the blaze for a short while, then called for second alarm help. With the help of southerly winds, the fire spread over a 2 and possibly 3 block area north of the original blaze. The fire is now under control. We don't know how many homes were involved. We do believe one fireman was slightly injured. Fire units are still on the scene. This is Ron Turner reporting from the 500 block of Northeast 5th.
The Board of Corrections shall not allow the inmate population of the following institutions and facilities under the jurisdiction and control of the department to exceed the following limits. Oklahoma State Penitentiary, 1,609. Oklahoma State Reformatory, 580. Oklahoma locking up 6 times as many per capita per 100,000 population as Minnesota, 250% more than Kansas, more than Texas, Arkansas, New Mexico, Colorado, or any surrounding state. It's a question of whether we as a legislature want to do something about it, because obviously if there's going to be any leadership in that, we're going to have to provide it.
And this is the problem of our time, and we're not going to be able to come up with any gilded, easy solution. It's going to take money and money and more money. As you well know, we've wrestled with it. I think we're making progress, but it's not anything that we're going to be able to, I believe, solve by the end of this session.
talking about crime, we're going to set the priority, of course, against violent crimes, crimes against persons, and we'll come down to property crimes. And but more particularly, though, we spend our time working the homicides, the robberies.
Do you plan any immediate large-scale changes in the police department?
Well, the changes will be gradual. Every police administrator comes in has in the back of his mind a new plan of action or change in management techniques. And I'm no exception, but mine will be gradual changes, and they'll primarily be along the lines of new manning levels. They'll be along the lines of change demography, and of course I'll make some command changes gradually and shift some assignments as the time goes by. But I'm talking about in a period of a year or 18 months.
I'm not sure what the solution is, but it is a problem that is reflected in our prison system population.
And if in any way that the customer would save 1.5 kilowatt hours per month, then he would pay, this would more than pay for itself. And we feel like that what we're doing is bringing a message to the customer and that we are actually helping the customer.
Our position is that if they want to advertise for the purposes that they do advertise for, which is primarily for institutional type purposes, to try to inform the public that the utility company is really doing a good job, that doesn't really benefit the consumer, it benefits the utility company.
I think we're all in agreement.
And I don't think that if this bill were to pass, that if they were to stop advertising at all, it wouldn't make any significant difference in the income of that company.
And I believe from the facts I have at hand that we're talking about over a 30-year period saving the consumers of Oklahoma several $billion on their electric bills. Electric bills are going to go up. Ain't no way out of that. Like Mr. Davis says, that it's going to get hot in the summertime and insurance rates are going to go up and electric bills are going to go up. What we're talking about is trying to hold them down as much as possible. It's my firm belief, based on the information I've been able to get together, that we are going to save money to the consumers of electrical power in Oklahoma.
I feel that my vote has no significance, that the decisions were made somewhere, someplace before I got there, and that since I cannot muster enough votes to override the decisions that have been made, that I'm just there because I'm an interested party, and so that I can be counted so that the staff can say that they met the federal requirements, that the commission met and that it said yes.
I think there are kinds of crimes that are violations of the law, but probably would not merit bringing a young person into the criminal justice system. But for the more serious crimes, I think that the certification process and the way it works now is a very lengthy sort of a thing and requires additional hearings and prevents us from being able to really investigate and apprehend the person early in the proceedings. And I would hope that the legislature would lower the age down to 16. Certainly for the more serious crimes.
We're dealing with the general credibility of government. And I think if government is going to be credible, the people in this time expect us to conduct it under public scrutiny. So I would urge you very sincerely to support the Keating Amendment on the theory that the public business ought to be conducted in public view, and for the second reason that if we are going to presume upon local government to impose these types of restrictions, then we certainly ought to be able to bite the bullet and say we will live up to that same standard that we exact.
When you listen to his plan, it sounds like most of the money that the consumers are going to be paying, the higher prices the consumers are going to be paying, it sounds like most of that money is going to go to the government in the form of taxation. For example, they talk about taxing the old oil, you know, $9 a barrel tax. Does this mean that we're moving on a road toward having the funds go to the government so that future investment in the energy field will have to be mainly governmental instead of private? I'm very concerned about that because I hope to see the future development of the energy resources of this country come from private investment and through the free enterprise system instead of strictly by governmental investment and governmental action.
Bulletproof vests have saved lives, a number of police officers across the country. Of course, each vest is designed differently, and vests of different types of manufacturers have, some are more effective than others. We're of the opinion, and very much of the position, that in Oklahoma that we should have a type of vest that would be capable of stopping a projectile from a weapon of the caliber that the trooper wears himself, because many deaths of police officers occur from their own weapon.
And it provides three benefits. It gets hard to adopt children into loving homes, for one thing. The second benefit is that it saves the state taxpayers money, and that the adopting parents pick up the payments or the bills for normal child rearing expenses, room, board, incidental expenses, educational expenses. And the third benefit is that we have a long list of parents who would like to adopt children, and this will provide some more children that can then be adopted that otherwise could not be because of the economic expenses of the continued medical payments, the operations, the training, therapy, etc.
To me, it's a moral conviction, because we have to dress and undress in front of your co-driver this hour. We come in and out of the bunk, usually in our BVDs, if you want to put it that way. And while we're off duty, it's not unusual to get out of the bunk 2 and 3 times while you're off to get up to relieve yourself and all this stuff. And we don't pull into truck stops. We don't pull into roadside parks and get fully dressed while we're still in the bunk. We come bailing out of that thing and tell them to get it over, and we whip it over on the shoulder of the road, kick the door open, and the other driver's sitting right there. We relieve ourselves and get right back in the bunk again. Now, to me, I don't feel like I ought to have to live that way with a female driver. To me, it's a moral conviction, because we have to dress and undress in front of your co-driver that's there. We come in and out of the bunk, usually in our BVDs, if you want to put it that way. And while we're off duty, it's not unusual to get out of the bunk 2 and 3 times while you're off to get up to relieve yourself and all this stuff. And we don't pull into truck stops. We don't pull into roadside parks and get fully dressed while we're still in the bunk. We come bailing out of that thing and tell them to get it over, and we whip it over on the shoulder of the road, kick the door open, and the other driver's sitting right there. We relieve ourselves and get right back in the bunk again. Now, to me, I don't feel like I ought to have to live that way with a female driver.
Men have no rights anymore, and this is what we're opposed to, that these men should have a right to choose not to run with her and not lose their job.
Picket the federal building. Picket the...
There's just not any words. People are awfully kind. Terry thanks you.
I think if you would read the statement that I made to the Congress the other night, I specifically said that I will continue to work with the Congress toward deregulation of newly discovered natural gas. What we have done so far, I think I went on to say when economic circumstances permit, what we've done so far is to set the newly discovered price of natural gas at the same price as its equivalent in energy of oil, which is the international price. So this is a substantial move, and I believe that my campaign commitment, which never put any time limit, is indeed intact.
To me, this is catastrophic. I think it is very much a technical error in the plan, and I will be contacting Dr. Schlesinger in the White House, urging them to have technical experts take a look at these definitions and to let them know that it's really going to bring new exploration in areas like Oklahoma and Texas and Louisiana to a screeching halt.
Now, as far as this tag reform is concerned, there's a few things in here that will help. And the only way it's going to help is for each one of us to make sure that in our district that the tag agencies aren't taken from the school children of Oklahoma. And if we don't do that on a day-to-day and a year-to-year basis, in 5 years, 3 years, 10 years, it'll be back in the same sad shape.
The ultimate question, do we take this much reform or none at all?
I'm like Mr. Dunn. I don't like everything that's in this bill. There's some things that if I just had my way, I'd change. But I like enough that's in this bill that I would vote for it, knowing that it does create meaningful reform in this system.
Hospital staff are assigned awards in what we consider an inefficient manner. Hospitals still provide services to a centralized geographic area. The organization structure is very inflexible and a little cumbersome. I don't understand it, to be frank with you. And overall, we do not seem to have a continuum of mental health care. We're treating certain mental illnesses, but we do not have a plan for mental health care in the state up until this time.
I really don't know what's going to happen. I really feel like that until we change the method of our funding of our school system, that we're going to be in real trouble. We're just not going to have the money for enrichment of the educational system in Oklahoma. We can either do one of the two things. We can raise the teacher salaries or enrich education. We're going to have to make that decision.
But I'm more concerned with the kid who just simply isn't learning to read and write. You know, and that's a critical factor. The gifted and talented child is going to make it. Certainly they could do better if they had some programs for them, and this amendment will not prohibit them from having those programs. But it just tears my heart out to see some little kid that's not reading and writing, and we're not able to do anything for them. I've seen that happen. It's just the saddest thing on earth.
The Board of Trustees had seen fit to authorize these raises, some of them from 13 to 43%, which is a clear violation. The legislative intent was that there would be no salaries at that level. Over 36,000, they immediately raised their director. So this was to ensure that there would be no raises for those top positions unless they were specifically authorized by the legislature. If next year we feel they deserve raises, then we can grant them. But for the time being, they are frozen where they are.
No, none of us in here are going to shed any tears for a multi-million-dollar industry until we can't turn on the lights, until you can't have a pilot light going and heat your water. It's real easy to throw rocks. It's real easy to make impassioned speeches against the utility giants of the state and of the nation. And it's real easy to say my friends at home are tired of high-priced gas and electricity. So am I. But the truth of the matter is, this is a short-range program. Look beyond next week, next month. I can assure you by next year, if this amendment is adopted, the people are going to be back at that corporation commission seeking massive rate increases because we have forced them to cannibalize the very profits that's keeping the system going.
Because this is the amendment where we determine whether we're going to deal on top of the table with hundreds of millions of dollars, or we're not going to deal on top of the table and we're going to look at the people and say, trust me. And I think I would prefer us to deal on top of the table and bridge back that horrible credibility gap that has come up between the public utility, the commission, and the citizens of this state.
Senator, we're not talking about prohibiting advertising. We're talking here in this bill about the prohibiting of advertising and passing those costs on to the ratepayer. So this bill would not prohibit advertising. They can still advertise. It's just a question of who's going to pay for it, whether it's going to be paid for by the stockholders of the company or whether it's going to be paid for by the consumer.
The tragic death yesterday of Oklahoma Highway Patrol Lieutenant Sal Howell only dramatizes quite vividly what is happening on our highways in this state every day. People are being killed by drinking drivers. And law enforcement officers have said this over and over again, but for some reason the general population seems to be somewhat nonchalant about the drinking driver. We can become incensed when someone is killed in a murder incident. But death by a vehicle as a result of a drinking driver is just as fatal and just as deadly.
That's great.